Elizabeth's hands trembled as she made a choice that would lead to 3 deaths, one forbidden marriage, and a secret so scandalous that Victorian England would never recover if it became public. 24 hours separated her from either starvation or becoming the richest woman in the country. She didn't know then that the silk dress she was selling belonged to a duchess, or that she was that duchess's daughter. She didn't know the man who would save her that night had unknowingly married his own father's granddaughter. And she certainly didn't know that the Gothic mansion waiting for her held a murdered woman's diary, a butler with blood on his hands, and a husband who'd been blamed for a crime he didn't commit. But ignorance, as Elizabeth would soon discover, was the only mercy she'd been granted. Elizabeth's hands trembled as she clutched the silk dress, her mother's last gift, her final connection to a world that no longer existed. 24 hours. That's all she had before her brother Thomas stopped breathing from hunger. The pawnbroker's shop reeked of desperation and old leather. 3 shillings, the man said, not looking up. Her throat closed. She thought, 3 shillings for the dress mother wore to the Queen's garden party. 3 shillings for memories that can't feed a dying child. But what choice did desperation ever leave? Thomas's hollow cheeks haunted every decision now. I'll take it. The words tasted like ash. She stumbled out into the rain-slicked London street, clutching the coins so tightly they cut into her palm. The November fog wrapped around her like a shroud, cold and damp against her threadbare cloak. She was invisible here, just another ghost among thousands the city had forgotten. Fresh bread. Still warm. A baker's boy called from across the street. The yeast smell made her stomach clench with hunger she'd learned to ignore. 2 years of practice made starvation almost familiar. Elizabeth crossed, her thin shoes soaking through. She handed over 2 shillings, leaving 1 for tomorrow. If there was a tomorrow. The bread was still hot when she tucked it inside her cloak, pressed against her chest like a treasure more valuable than gold. She thought, how did we fall so far, so fast? 6 months ago they'd had servants. Now she was the servant of survival itself. But what happened next would change everything, not just for Elizabeth, but for every secret the Blackwood family had buried for generations. Because sometimes salvation comes dressed as damnation, and desperation makes us blind to the difference. The rain intensified as she hurried toward Whitechapel. Shadows moved in the alleys, predators who could smell vulnerability like blood in water. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Faster. Just get home. Just get to Thomas. Well. What's a lady doing in this part of town? 3 men blocked her path. The leader's smile revealed blackened teeth. Elizabeth's blood turned to ice. The bread, if they took it, Thomas would die. Simple as that. Mathematics of poverty, no food equals death. I have nothing, she said, hating how her voice shook. That cloak looks warm enough. He stepped closer. Gin and rot overwhelmed her senses, smell so thick she could taste it. She ran. Footsteps thundered behind her. Her lungs burned. The bread slipped in her grip, and she clutched it tighter, nails digging into crust. Left turn, right turn, the maze of alleys all looked the same in the fog. A dead end loomed ahead like fate itself. This is how it ends, she thought. Murdered for bread in a London alley. The bitter irony, surviving 2 years of poverty only to die 3 streets from home. A hand grabbed her shoulder. She screamed, "Get away from her." The voice cut through the night like a blade. Deep, commanding, aristocratic. A figure emerged from the fog, tall and broad-shouldered, his black coat immaculate despite the rain. Gray eyes like winter storms. The 3 men froze. Lord Blackwood, one whispered, backing away. They vanished into the fog like smoke. Elizabeth stood paralyzed, still clutching the bread, rain streaming down her face. The stranger, Blackwood, didn't move. Just kept watching her with those storm cloud eyes that saw too much. She thought, why is a duke in Whitechapel at midnight? Nothing good brings nobility to these streets. You're bleeding, he said finally. She looked down. Her palm was cut from the coins. Blood mixed with rainwater, dripping onto cobblestones. I'm fine. She needed to leave, to get to Thomas, but her legs wouldn't obey. Shock, probably. Or the way he stared at her as if seeing a ghost. No one is fine in Whitechapel at midnight. He pulled out a handkerchief, pristine white silk that probably cost more than her yearly rent. Especially not someone who sells dresses at Harrison's pawnshop. Her breath caught. He'd followed her. But why? What did a duke want with a starving nobody? The question that would haunt her for months to come. Because Alexander Blackwood's reasons were darker than she could imagine. And by the time she discovered the truth, it would be far too late to run. I don't know what you're talking about. Elizabeth's voice came out stronger than she felt. Already stepping backward, calculating escape routes. Don't lie. His tone wasn't cruel, just exhausted. I saw you through the window. That dress, French silk, pre-war design. Extraordinary craftsmanship. Your mother's? How did he know? She thought, either he's been watching me for days, or this is the world's strangest coincidence. Neither option felt safe. What do you want? The question emerged as a whisper. The Duke of Blackwood, she'd heard the name even in her reduced circumstances, whispered with equal parts fear and fascination, tilted his head. Rain dripped from his dark hair, making him look less like aristocracy and more like something carved from the storm itself. Beautiful and dangerous. I want to make you an offer. He paused, weighing words carefully. But not here. You're shivering, and that bread will be cold soon. Your brother is waiting. Terror spiked through her chest. How do you know about Thomas? I know many things, Miss Grey. He turned, gesturing toward a black carriage waiting at the alley's end. Including that you have 1 shilling left, 3 days until eviction, and no prospects except the workhouse. Am I wrong? Every instinct screamed danger. She thought, this is how girls disappear. Follow a stranger, end up dead in the Thames. But Thomas's face flashed in her mind, those sunken eyes, the way he'd stopped asking for food because he knew there wasn't any. What kind of offer? The words felt like surrender. Something flickered across Blackwood's face, satisfaction? Relief? Gone too quickly to identify. The kind that requires privacy. 5 minutes of your time. If you refuse afterward, my driver takes you home. No conditions. You have my word as a gentleman. A gentleman's word. She almost laughed. Gentlemen didn't lurk in Whitechapel. Didn't follow desperate women. Didn't make mysterious offers in fog-shrouded alleys. But what choice did desperation ever leave? 5 minutes, she agreed, and felt the first chain snap into place. The carriage interior smelled of leather and tobacco and bay rum cologne, sense of wealth she'd almost forgotten existed. Elizabeth perched on the edge of the velvet seat, bread still clutched against her chest like armor. The contrast between luxury and her threadbare dress felt obscene. Blackwood sat opposite, studying her with intensity that made her skin prickle. You look exactly like her, he said finally. Like who? My late wife. His jaw tightened, muscle jumping beneath skin. The resemblance is uncanny. Same eyes, same bone structure, same. He stopped, turning toward the rain-streaked window. For a moment in that alley, I thought she'd come back. Impossible, but grief makes us believe impossible things. She thought, he's mad. Grief-broken and searching for ghosts. I should leave now. But curiosity, the dangerous, stupid thing, kept her frozen. I'm sorry for your loss, but I don't see what that has to do with me. Everything. He looked back, and she saw desperation beneath the aristocratic mask. Raw need that matched her own. I need a wife. You need money. I propose a business arrangement. The bread slipped in her grip. You're insane. Perhaps. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. But I'm also the richest man in England. Marry me tomorrow, and you'll never worry about bread again. Your brother gets the finest doctors, the best schools, a future. You get financial independence beyond anything you can imagine. Independence. The word tasted like hope and poison mixed. She thought, there's always a catch. Always. Nothing comes free, especially from desperate dukes who chase ghosts. Why me? You could marry any woman in London. Because you're desperate enough to say yes. And because, he hesitated, something raw flashing in those gray eyes. Because when I look at you, I see a chance to right an old wrong. The details don't matter. What matters is this: do you want to save your brother or not? Thomas. Always Thomas. The weight that kept her moving when exhaustion screamed to stop. She thought of his labored breathing, ribs showing through nightshirt, the way he tried to smile even while dying. What's the catch? Because life always had one. The marriage stays secret for 6 months. You live at Blackwood Manor, play the role of Duchess, but maintain separate quarters. After 6 months, if you wish to leave, I grant you a divorce settlement of £50,000. He named the sum as casually as discussing whether. If you stay, you inherit everything when I die. £50,000. The number was incomprehensible. More money than she'd see in 10 lifetimes. Enough to buy safety, comfort, freedom. Too much. Far too much for simply playing dress-up in a dead woman's clothes. Why would you do this? Her voice barely worked. Because I have my reasons, and they're mine alone. Steel entered his tone. Do we have an agreement, Miss Grey? This was the moment. The choice that would define everything after. Elizabeth looked down at the bread, still warm, and made a decision that would destroy and save her in equal measure. Yes. And sealed her fate without knowing the price. The marriage contract arrived at dawn, delivered by a stone-faced solicitor who looked at their squalid room with barely concealed disgust. Elizabeth sat at the rickety table while Thomas slept fitfully in the corner, and read through terms that seemed pulled from a fever dream. £50,000 upon dissolution of marriage after 6 months minimum. Her voice barely whispered. She thought, that's more than father earned in his entire life. More than I could imagine even exists. The paper felt heavy in her hands, expensive stock, embossed seal, the weight of legitimacy. Full access to estate accounts during marriage. Separate living quarters. No conjugal expectations. The last phrase made her cheeks burn. So that's what he wanted, a ghost wife. A living portrait of his dead beloved to haunt his halls. The thought should have repulsed her. Instead, she felt odd kinship with his pain. She thought, haven't I been haunting my own life since mother died? Both of us just ghosts playing at being alive. Is he kind? Thomas's voice came weakly from the bed, pulling her from dark thoughts. The Duke? Elizabeth looked at her brother's grey face and felt her heart crack. 12 years old and already looking ancient from hunger. Last night he'd insisted she take half the bread even though she'd lied about eating earlier. Selfless even while dying. That's what poverty did, either made you cruel or impossibly kind. Thomas had chosen kindness. I don't know if he's kind, she answered honestly. But he's our only chance. The solicitor cleared his throat impatiently. His Grace requires an answer by noon. The ceremony is arranged for 2 o'clock at his private chapel. A doctor will arrive within the hour to attend to your brother. Within the hour. Before she'd even signed. Elizabeth's hand trembled as she picked up the pen. She thought, what kind of man has doctors on standby for a stranger's dying brother? Either extraordinarily generous or extraordinarily manipulative. Perhaps both. Perhaps it doesn't matter which. The nib touched paper. This is insane, she thought. You're signing your life away to a man you met once in a dark alley. A man who chases ghosts and makes impossible offers. But her hand kept moving, forming letters with the careful precision mother had taught her years ago, when penmanship still mattered. Elizabeth in Grey. The signature looked small and lost on the heavy parchment. Final as a tombstone. The solicitor produced a second document. The special license. His Grace obtained it last night through the Archbishop. Quite irregular, but he trailed off, as if the Duke's influence made the impossible merely inconvenient. Last night. Before she'd even agreed. The realization hit like cold water. Blackwood had known she'd say yes. Had counted on her desperation. Prepared everything in advance like a chess player 3 moves ahead. She thought, I'm not a person to him. I'm a piece on a board. A ghost-shaped piece to fill a ghost-shaped hole. The thought should have angered her. Instead, she was too tired for anger. Too hungry for pride. Sign here as well. She signed. The moment the pen lifted, everything changed. The solicitor's expression shifted from contempt to careful neutrality. The look servants gave valuable property. Your Grace, he said, and it took Elizabeth a moment to realize he meant her. The physician will arrive shortly. I'll have your belongings collected and sent to Blackwood Manor. Our belongings could fit in a carpet bag, she thought but didn't say. 1 dress each. Thomas's wooden horse. Mother's prayer book. The accumulated possessions of 2 years' poverty. After he left, Elizabeth sat in sudden silence. Through the grimy window, London awakened, vendors calling, carriages clattering, the great machine of the city grinding forward. Yesterday she'd been invisible. Today she was a duchess. Tomorrow she'd live in a manor house with a man who'd married her ghost. She thought, how many women throughout history have made this same bargain? Sold themselves for survival and called it marriage? The door opened. A gray-haired doctor entered, bag in hand, followed by 2 assistants carrying medical equipment that gleamed even in the dim light. They moved toward Thomas with professional efficiency that spoke of expensive training. Wait. Elizabeth stood, instinct overriding shock. Who sent you? The Duke of Blackwood, Your Grace. The doctor bowed slightly. The title sounded strange in this room that reeked of poverty. I'm Dr. Pemberton, Royal Physician. His Grace was quite insistent I attend immediately. Royal Physician. For a street urchin dying in Whitechapel. Elizabeth watched them examine Thomas, their movements gentle despite his poverty and grime. One assistant was already preparing some kind of tonic that smelled of herbs and honey, while another checked his temperature with instruments she'd never seen before, brass and glass that caught the light like jewelry. Severe malnutrition, Dr. Pemberton announced after examining Thomas's thin chest. Possible consumption, though it's early yet. We'll need to move him somewhere clean immediately. Fresh air, proper food, complete rest. He looked at Elizabeth with grandfatherly kindness. I understand he'll be residing at Blackwood Manor? She nodded, not trusting her voice. The lump in her throat threatened to choke her. Excellent. The country air will do him good. Children are remarkably resilient, Your Grace. He'll recover. The doctor smiled. I've seen worse cases thrive with proper care. Your Grace. The title felt like a costume 3 sizes too large. Elizabeth sank back into her chair, watching strangers save her brother's life with tools and medicine she couldn't afford in 10 lifetimes. The weight of what she'd done settled over her like a heavy cloak. She thought, I've sold myself. That's the truth of it. Dressed in legal language and pretty contracts, but I'm no different from the girls on Commercial Street who sell themselves for shillings. I just got a better price. But Thomas would live. That had to be enough. That had to make the bargain worth it. In 6 hours, she'd be married to a man she didn't know. In 6 months, she could walk away richer than she'd ever dreamed. But the question that gnawed at her wasn't about money or freedom. It was simpler, more terrifying. Who was Alexander Blackwood, and what would he do with a ghost who refused to stay properly dead? The private chapel at Blackwood Manor smelled of beeswax and old stone and something else, roses, wilting in vases, their sweet scent turned cloying. Elizabeth stood before the altar in a borrowed dress of ivory silk that fit perfectly. Too perfectly. As if made for her. She thought, it was hers, wasn't it? The first Duchess. I'm wearing a dead woman's wedding dress to marry her widower. The gothic horror of it should send me running. but her feet stayed planted on cold marble floors. It was hers, whispered the maid who'd helped her dress, a young girl named Mary with frightened eyes. I'm not to speak of it, Your Grace. Please don't tell. So she was marrying a dead woman's husband in a dead woman's dress in a dead woman's chapel. Elizabeth felt a strange calm settle over her bones. She thought, I've already sold Mother's dress for bread. What's one more ghost to wear? The chapel doors opened with a groan of ancient hinges. Alexander Blackwood entered, immaculate in black morning coat and grey waistcoat. His cravat was tied with mathematical precision, each fold deliberate. Everything about him screamed control, except his eyes. Those storm-gray eyes held barely contained chaos. He stopped 3 feet away. Close enough to see the tension in his jaw, the shadows beneath his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. Far enough to maintain the fiction of civility. You came, he said, and she heard genuine surprise beneath the formal tone. You doubted? Everyone doubts eventually. He gestured toward the elderly vicar waiting nervously by the altar, prayer book trembling in his hands. Shall we begin? The sooner this is done, the sooner your brother receives proper care. Thomas. Right. This was all for Thomas. She repeated it like a prayer as they approached the altar. The vicar's hands shook as he opened his book. He kept glancing at the Duke with the fearful reverence of a mouse before a cat. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the sight of God. The words washed over her. Elizabeth focused on the stained glass window above the altar, St. Catherine holding her wheel, forever frozen in her moment of martyrdom. She thought, an apt patron saint for this marriage. Catherine married to the wheel. I'm marrying a wheel of my own. Do you, Alexander Edmund Blackwood, take this woman? I do. Clipped. Final. No hesitation. As if he'd been waiting years to say those words. The vicar turned to her with watery eyes. Do you, Elizabeth in grey, wait? Blackwood's voice cut through the ceremony like a knife through silk. The vicar froze mid-breath. Elizabeth's heart stopped. She thought, he's changing his mind. Leaving me at the altar in a dead woman's dress. And somehow that would be worse than anything, having glimpsed salvation only to watch it vanish. There's something you need to know before you agree. He reached into his coat and produced a folded document, edges sharp as accusations. An addendum to our contract. I had my solicitor draw it up this morning. Elizabeth's fingers were numb as she unfolded the paper. The legal language swam before her eyes, but certain phrases leaped out like predators from fog, absolute prohibition on inquiries into the late Duchess. Forbidden from entering the East Wing without express permission. Must attend all social functions as required. Failure to comply results in immediate forfeiture of all financial agreements. You're putting me in a cage, she said flatly. Not a question. A recognition. A gilded cage with £50,000 waiting at the end. His expression didn't change, carved from marble. But yes. There are rules. My past is not open for discussion. Certain rooms remain locked. You will smile at society events and play the devoted wife. In exchange, you live in luxury and your brother recovers. Simple transaction. Simple. She almost laughed. She thought, there's nothing simple about marrying a man who wants my silence more than my company. Who needs a ghost more than a wife? But the vicar was waiting, and Thomas was dying, and she'd already crossed too many bridges to turn back now. The point of no return lay miles behind her, somewhere between the pawnshop and the alley where Blackwood had found her. Where do I sign? Something flickered in Blackwood's eyes. Respect? Disappointment? Approval? Gone too quickly to decipher. He produced a pen, silver and heavy. She signed without reading further. What did it matter? She was already drowning, these were just details about the depth of the water. Now we may continue, Blackwood told the vicar, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Do you, Elizabeth in grey, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do. The words felt like stones dropping into a well. She waited for the splash that never came. "I now pronounce you man and wife." "You may," the vicar hesitated, looking between them uncertainly. "That won't be necessary," Blackwood said coldly. "No kiss. No touch." He simply took her hand, his skin warm even through her glove, and led her toward the vestry to sign the register. The scratch of pen on paper sounded deafening in the silent chapel, like claws on glass. Mrs. Elizabeth Blackwood, Duchess of Blackwood. The richest woman in England on paper. The loneliest in reality. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know as she signed her new name, was that this marriage would lead to 3 deaths, 2 betrayals, and 1 secret that would either destroy her or make her more powerful than any duchess in England's history. But she'd discover that soon enough. Far too soon. They emerged from the chapel into autumn sunlight that felt too bright, too cheerful for what had just occurred. A line of 30 servants stood assembled on the gravel drive in crisp uniforms, faces carefully blank. Judging her. Measuring her. Finding her wanting. The head butler stepped forward, a man of perhaps 60 with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. "Your Grace, may I present the household staff?" He didn't bow quite as deeply as protocol demanded. "I am Morrison, butler of Blackwood Manor these 32 years. Longer than she'd been alive." The unspoken message was clear as crystal: "You're temporary. I'm permanent. This is my house, not yours." "Morrison will show you to your quarters," Blackwood said, already turning away toward a waiting carriage. "I have urgent business in London. I'll return for dinner at 8. Dress formally." He paused at the carriage door, not looking back. "And Elizabeth? Welcome to Blackwood Manor. I hope you don't come to regret your choice." Then he was gone, departing in a spray of gravel that peppered her borrowed dress like tiny accusations. Elizabeth stood alone before the assembled staff, a stranger in a dead woman's clothes, married to a ghost she didn't understand. Morrison's lip curled ever so slightly, barely perceptible but unmistakable. "This way, Your Grace. I should warn you, Her late Grace's rooms have been prepared for you. His Grace was most insistent you occupy them." The east wing loomed before her, its windows dark despite the bright afternoon. Elizabeth felt eyes watching from those shadows. The first Duchess, perhaps. Or something worse. She thought, "What have I done?" And more terrifying, "What will he do to me?" The Duchess's chambers were a shrine to a dead woman. Elizabeth stood in the doorway, unable to move forward or back. Every surface gleamed with obsessive care: crystal perfume bottles arranged by height on the vanity, silver hairbrushes polished to mirrors, a silk dressing gown draped over a chair as if waiting for its owner to return any moment. The air smelled of lavender and something else beneath it. Decay hidden under sweetness, like fruit rotting from the inside. She thought, "This is wrong. All of it. I shouldn't be here, wearing this woman's life like an ill-fitting costume." "Her Grace preferred these rooms for their light," Morrison said behind her, his voice carrying a warning wrapped in politeness. "His Grace thought you might appreciate their comfort." Comfort. The word was a knife wrapped in velvet. Elizabeth stepped inside, and the door clicked shut with a finality that made her skin crawl. She was alone with a ghost who'd been dead 3 years but still owned every inch of this space. A portrait dominated the far wall, massive and imposing. Elizabeth approached slowly, her footsteps muffled by carpet thick as moss, each step feeling like trespassing. The woman in the painting had her face, the same dark hair, same delicate bone structure, same gray-green eyes that seemed to follow movement. But there the resemblance ended. The painted Duchess wore confidence like armor. Elizabeth wore borrowed silk that smelled of another woman's perfume. "You were beautiful," she whispered to the portrait. "Is that why he can't let you go? Or is there something else? Something darker?" No answer. Just painted eyes judging her, finding her wanting, asking, "What makes you think you deserve to wear my life?" She turned away, heart hammering, and found herself facing a writing desk position by the window. Papers were stacked neatly: correspondence, invitations, half-finished letters. Elizabeth's hand hovered over them. She thought, the addendum forbade inquiries into the late Duchess. But does reading count as inquiry? Or is it just curiosity? Her fingers touched the top letter. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind that announced wealth with every fiber. The handwriting was elegant and confident. My dearest Alexander, I fear this child will be the death of me, but what joy to give you an heir at last. The doctors say all is progressing well, though I confess to terrible dreams. Last night I dreamed the baby had your father's eyes, and I woke screaming. Elizabeth dropped the letter as if burned, pulse racing. The child that killed her. The heir that never came. The dreams that spoke of secrets Elizabeth didn't want to know. She backed away from the desk, hands shaking. A knock at the door made her jump. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her heart slam against ribs. Enter. Mary the maid slipped inside, eyes downcast in that way servants had, seeing everything while appearing to see nothing. Your Grace, I'm to help you prepare for dinner. His Grace requests formal dress by 8 o'clock. She moved to the wardrobe and pulled out another gown, deep blue silk with jet beading that caught light like tears. I've laid out appropriate attire. Elizabeth stared at the dress spread across the bed like a corpse laid out for viewing. She thought, let me guess. This was hers too. Everything in this room is hers. Even me, in a way. I'm just another possession he's acquired to furnish his grief. It was hers, she said flatly. Not a question. Mary's face flushed pink. His Grace kept everything. Said it would be wasteful to discard perfectly good clothing. The late Duchess had exquisite taste. Or he's trying to resurrect the dead. The words came out bitter, sharp. Elizabeth immediately regretted them. The maid wasn't at fault for her master's obsession. I'm sorry, Mary. It's been a very long day. Yes, Your Grace. Mary's voice carried no warmth, no welcome. Just duty performed for a stranger occupying the rightful owner's space. Shall I help you undress? As Mary unlaced the wedding gown, Elizabeth caught her reflection in the vanity mirror, the borrowed ivory silk, the carefully arranged hair, the paleness of shock making her look ghostly. She thought, I look like a bride prepared for burial. Perhaps I am. Perhaps this whole manor is a tomb, and I've just agreed to be interred alive for 6 months. Mary, she said suddenly, watching the maid's face in the mirror. How did she die? The first Duchess? The maid's hands stilled on the laces. Silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. I'm not permitted to discuss it, Your Grace. Who forbids you? Morrison? The Duke? Both. And Mary's voice dropped to barely a whisper. My own good sense. There are things we don't speak of at Blackwood Manor. Best you learn that quickly, Your Grace. For your own safety. The warning was unmistakable. Elizabeth felt cold settle in her stomach. She thought, what kind of house has rules about which truths can be spoken? What kind of death requires such silence? The blue dress fit perfectly, of course. Mary arranged her hair in an elaborate style that must have been the first Duchess's preference, each pin placed with precision, as if following a diagram only she could see. Elizabeth watched herself transform in the mirror, watched the stranger emerge wearing a dead woman's fashion. There's one more thing, Mary said, producing a velvet box from a drawer. Inside lay a necklace that made Elizabeth's breath catch, sapphires and diamonds forming a pattern like frozen tears, heavy as sin. His Grace insists you wear the family jewels tonight. They belonged to the Blackwood Duchesses for 6 generations. Elizabeth's hands shook as Mary fastened the necklace. The stones were cold against her skin, heavy as chains. She stared at her reflection and saw a beautiful, terrified stranger playing dress-up in a museum. The clock in the corner chimed 7 o'clock. 1 hour until dinner. 1 hour until she faced her husband across a table and pretended this was normal. That any of this was normal. Mary left, and Elizabeth sank onto the bed, silk dress pooling around her like water, like blood. The room felt smaller suddenly. The walls closer. The portrait's eyes more accusing. The scent of lavender more suffocating. She thought, I could run. Take Thomas and disappear before it's too late. But where would they go? Back to Whitechapel? Back to starvation? And how far would she get before Blackwood's influence tracked them down? The truth settled over her like the heavy necklace. She was trapped. Not by locked doors or physical restraints, but by need. By love for a dying brother. By poverty that made freedom impossible. A clock chimed somewhere deeper in the manor. 7:30. Elizabeth rose, smoothed her skirt with trembling hands, and practiced smiling in the mirror. The reflection smiled back, perfect and empty and dead. Just another portrait in a house full of ghosts. She thought, if I must be a ghost, then I'll be one who watches. Who learns? Who discovers what secrets this house is hiding? Because nothing this controlled, this precise, this obsessed with silence happens without something terrible buried beneath. And whatever Blackwood was hiding, she would find it. Before it found her first. The dining room stretched like a cathedral, designed to make mortals feel insignificant. Elizabeth sat at one end of a table long enough to seat 40 guests. Blackwood occupied the other end, separated by an expanse of polished mahogany that reflected candlelight like dark water. They might as well have been in different countries. She thought, we're married, but he can't even sit close enough to pass the salt without a footman's assistance. What kind of marriage is this? The soup is acceptable? His voice echoed in the cavernous space, formal as a stranger's. Yes. She hadn't tasted it. The silver spoon felt foreign in her hand, heavy enough to require conscious effort to lift. Yesterday she'd eaten stale bread with her fingers. Tonight she dined on consommé that probably cost more than a year's rent in Whitechapel. The absurdity of it would have made her laugh if she weren't so terrified. Silence fell again, broken only by the scrape of cutlery on porcelain and the crackling fire. Morrison stood like a marble statue near the sideboard, supervising two footmen who moved with ghostly efficiency, removing plates, pouring wine, existing without seeming to exist. Elizabeth studied her husband across the impossible distance. In candlelight, he looked carved from shadows, all sharp angles and controlled movements, each gesture measured. Not once did he meet her eyes. She wondered if he saw her at all, or just the ghost he'd hired to haunt his halls. Tomorrow you'll meet with Mrs. Thornton, the housekeeper, Blackwood said abruptly, his tone suggesting he was reciting a prepared list. She'll review your duties as Duchess. Social obligations, household management, charitable appearances. The season begins in 6 weeks. You'll need proper training. Training. Like a dog. Elizabeth's grip tightened on her fork. And Thomas? When can I see my brother? Your brother is settled in the East Wing nursery. Dr. Pemberton reports the fever has broken. He's resting comfortably. Blackwood took a measured sip of wine, deliberate as everything he did. You may visit after breakfast tomorrow. May visit. As if she needed permission to see her own brother. She thought, he gives with one hand and takes with the other. Salvation wrapped in chains. Freedom that costs everything. I'd like to visit him tonight. Impossible. The East Wing is locked after 8 o'clock. His tone brooked no argument. Then unlock it. Her voice came out harder than intended, anger finally breaking through fear. For the first time that evening, Blackwood looked directly at her. His gray eyes were cold as winter seas, revealing nothing. The East Wing remains locked. Those are the rules, Elizabeth. Rules you made without my input. Rules you agreed to when you signed the contract. He set down his glass with deliberate care, the sound of crystal on would sharpen the silence. I suggest you remember our arrangement, Your Grace. You're here for 6 months. 6 months of playing the role I require. After that, you're free to take your £50,000 and go. Until then, you follow the rules. All of them. The formal title in his mouth sounded like an insult. Elizabeth felt heat rising in her chest, anger and something else. Shame, perhaps. At being so easily bought. So desperately used. So completely owned. And what role am I playing exactly? Her voice came out sharper than she'd intended, but she didn't care anymore.
The pretense was exhausting. The obedient ghost? The replacement wife?
Tell me, Your Grace, so I know which mask to wear at breakfast.
Blackwood's jaw tightened, muscle jumping beneath skin. For a moment, she thought he might answer honestly. Show her something real beneath the aristocratic control. Instead, he stood, his chair scraping back with a sound like nails on glass. I have work in my study. Don't wait up. He walked out mid-dinner as if she were furniture. Just left without another word, his footsteps echoing down the corridor until silence swallowed them. Elizabeth sat alone at the absurd table, surrounded by servants who wouldn't look at her and ghosts she couldn't see. Morrison and the footmen remained frozen, eyes averted, pretending they hadn't witnessed the Duke abandoning his bride on their wedding night. She thought, is this what the next 6 months will be? Dinners alone in cavernous rooms, wearing dead women's dresses, speaking to a husband who can't bear to look at me?
I've lost my appetite, she announced to no one in particular. Her voice sounded small in the vast space.
I'll retire to my rooms.
Morrison bowed with that slight curl of his lip she was learning to recognize.
Very good, Your Grace. Shall I send Mary to attend you? No. She needed to be alone. To think.
To scream into a pillow where no one would hear.
I can manage myself.
The corridors of Blackwood Manor twisted like a labyrinth designed by someone with a cruel sense of humor. Elizabeth tried to remember the path to her chambers but took a wrong turn somewhere near the portrait gallery, dozens of dead Blackwoods staring down at her with judgment in their painted eyes.
She should turn back. Find a servant to guide her. But something drew her forward, curiosity or fate or simple stubbornness.
A door stood slightly ajar at the hall's end, warm light spilling through the crack like a secret wanting to be discovered.
Against all reason and every warning, Elizabeth approached.
The room beyond was a study, but not the formal kind designed for show.
This was intimate. Personal.
A writing desk sat by the window covered in papers. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes that looked actually read, spines cracked, pages dog-eared. And above the fireplace hung something that made her blood run cold.
Another portrait of Catherine. But this one was different. Unfinished. Raw.
The woman sat in a garden, one hand on her swollen belly, her face turned toward something outside the frame. Her expression was haunting, not the confident beauty of the formal portrait downstairs, but something desperate.
Terrified. Her eyes seemed to plead with the viewer, help me. Please. Someone help me.
Elizabeth stepped closer, drawn by the painter's brushwork and the raw emotion captured there.
She thought, what was she afraid of? What did she see coming?
Her foot knocked against something hidden beneath a dust sheet. She looked down, heart hammering. A wooden box lay half concealed, as if someone had tried to hide it but given up halfway. Elizabeth knelt and opened it with trembling hands.
Inside, letters tied with black ribbon. And beneath them, a leather journal. She knew she shouldn't.
Knew the addendum forbade exactly this. But her hands moved of their own accord, opening the journal to a random page.
The handwriting was different from the elegant script she'd seen earlier, hurried, desperate, ink blotted as if written while crying. August 12, 1842, he knows.
Dear God, he knows everything. I saw it in his eyes tonight at dinner, the way he looked at me, as if I were something vile that had crawled into his bed. I thought I'd been careful, but Alexander always discovers the truth eventually.
I'm so frightened. So frightened of what he'll do.
Elizabeth's heart slammed against her ribs. She flipped forward, hands shaking so badly she could barely turn pages.
August 20th, he confronted me about the child.
Asked whose child.
I couldn't lie to his face anymore.
The look on his face when I told him the truth, I've never seen such hatred in a human being.
Pure, cold hatred. He said I'd destroyed everything. Destroyed us.
He's locked me in the East Wing.
Won't see me. Won't speak to me except through servants.
I'm trapped here with this baby that might kill me, and the entry ended mid-sentence, as if she'd been interrupted.
Elizabeth flipped through remaining pages with growing horror.
All blank except the very last one, written in a shaking hand that was barely legible. September 3rd, the pains have started. It's too early, the baby isn't due for another month. I'm bleeding. I'm so scared. I begged Morrison to send for Dr. Pemberton, but he says His Grace gave orders that I'm not to be disturbed. That I'm to stay locked in these rooms until I've learned my lesson. But what lesson? How to die alone. Alexander, if you ever read this, if you ever feel remorse, know that I'm sorry. Sorry for everything. But this baby is innocent. Please don't punish an innocent child for my sins. Please, the entry ended. Nothing after. Just blank pages and the silence of death. Elizabeth's hands trembled so violently the journal fell, landing open on the floor. She stared at it, her mind racing through implications she didn't want to face. The first Duchess hadn't died in childbirth. She'd been left to die. Locked away and denied medical care as punishment for infidelity. And Blackwood, her husband, had let it happen. What are you doing in here? Elizabeth spun around. Blackwood stood in the doorway, his face a mask of cold fury that made him look like a stranger. In his hand, he held a lamp that cast dancing shadows across his features, transforming him into something from a nightmare. She thought, he's going to kill me. Just like he killed her. I got lost, Elizabeth stammered, but her hands still clutched the journal. The evidence. The truth written in a dead woman's desperate handwriting. His eyes dropped to it, and something flickered across his face. Panic? Recognition? Fear? Then the mask returned, harder than before, impenetrable as stone. Put that down. His voice was deadly quiet. She didn't die in childbirth. Elizabeth's voice shook, but she forced the words out. You killed her. You locked her away and refused to send for the doctor. You let her bleed to death as punishment. Put it down. His roar made her flinch, made her knees weak, but she didn't drop the journal. Instead, she clutched it tighter against her chest like a shield, like proof of the monster she'd married. Blackwood stepped into the room, each footfall measured, deliberate. Predatory. The lamplight threw his shadow enormous across the wall, a giant looming over her. You have no idea what you're talking about. You don't know the full story. Don't I? She backed toward the window, feeling cold glass against her spine. Trapped. You dressed me in her clothes. Put me in her rooms. Made me wear her jewelry. You're trying to recreate her so you can destroy her all over again. Punish her memory by controlling me. She thought, he's going to hurt me. Lock me away like he locked Catherine. History repeating itself, and I'm too stupid to have seen it coming. I said he was close now, close enough that she could smell tobacco and rage, see the muscle twitching in his jaw. Close enough to grab her. Put down the journal. Or what? The words burst out before fear could stop them. You'll lock me in the East Wing too? Leave me to die while you watch? Is that what happened to her? Did you watch her suffer? His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. Not hard enough to bruise but firm enough to terrify. His gray eyes bored into hers, and for the first time since they'd met, she saw past the control. Saw the abyss beneath, grief and guilt and something that might have been madness. If you value your brother's life, he whispered, his voice deadly soft, each word precise as a scalpel, you will put down that journal, return to your rooms, and forget everything you read. Do you understand me, Elizabeth? Thomas. He was threatening Thomas. The world tilted. Elizabeth's blood turned to ice water in her veins. She thought, he'll hurt Thomas to keep his secrets. He'll let an innocent child die rather than face the truth of what he did. She released the journal. It tumbled to the floor, pages splaying open like a broken bird, Catherine's handwriting visible even from here, a ghost crying out from beyond death. Good girl. Blackwood released her wrist and stepped back, his face once again a mask of aristocratic control. As if the past 5 minutes hadn't happened. As if he hadn't just threatened to murder a child. Now get out of this study. These rooms are forbidden to you. If I find you here again,
There will be consequences. She fled.
Ran through the dark corridors, heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her ribs. Her breath came in gasps. The sapphire necklace felt like a noose around her throat. She ran until she found her chambers, slammed the door, and collapsed against it. Her whole body shook. She thought she understood the bargained money for pretense, wealth for silence. But this was something darker.
Something poisonous.
She thought, I've married a murderer who sees me as a second chance at vengeance. And there's no escape because he owns everything, my future, my brother's life, even my ability to tell the truth. A soft knock made her jump.
Your Grace?
Mary's voice came through the door.
I heard, are you unwell? Shall I fetch something? No.
Elizabeth forced her voice steady.
I'm fine. Just tired. That's all. Silence.
Then Mary's footsteps retreating down the hall.
Elizabeth listened until certain she was alone, then moved to the window. The gardens stretched below, silvered by moonlight. Beautiful and dead. Everything here was beautiful and dead. She thought, I need help. I can't do this alone. But who would believe me? Who would help a nobody from Whitechapel against a duke?
A memory surfaced 3 days ago, had it only been 3 days, before the wedding. A woman in emerald silk descending from an ivory carriage. Sharp eyes and sharper words.
Lady Victoria Ashford.
I've come to warn you, Victoria had said.
Alexander Blackwood destroys everything he loves. When you need help and you will, come find me.
At the time, Elizabeth had dismissed it as jealousy from a woman scorned.
But now, with Catherine's journal fresh in her mind and Blackwood's threats still echoing, Victoria's warning felt like prophecy.
She moved to the writing desk and found paper, pen, ink. Her hand shook as she wrote, Lady Victoria, you were right about everything.
I need your help. Please come to Blackwood Manor tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Tell them you're paying a social call.
I'm in terrible danger. Elizabeth Blackwood. She sealed it and rang for a servant. A young footman appeared, barely 20, with kind eyes that reminded her of Thomas. I need this delivered to Lady Victoria Ashford at Belgrave Square tonight.
Immediately. It's urgent.
She pressed coins into his hand, her last shillings from the pawnshop, somehow still in her pocket.
Tell no one. Especially not Morrison or His Grace. Can you do that?
The footman looked at the coins, at her face, at the fear she couldn't quite hide. Something in his expression softened.
Yes, Your Grace. I'll see it delivered within the hour. Thank you.
The words came out as a whisper.
Thank you so much.
After he left, Elizabeth paced her gilded cage. The bed looked obscenely comfortable, silk sheets and down pillows that probably cost a fortune. She thought, I could sleep in luxury while my brother heals in the nursery. I could endure 6 months of pretense and walk away with £50,000.
All I have to do is forget what I read. Forget that Catherine died screaming and alone. Forget that the man I married might do the same to me. But some truths, once learned, couldn't be forgotten.
They burned like brands on the soul. Dawn came slowly, grey light seeping through windows like water through a crack.
Elizabeth hadn't slept. She stood at the window watching the world wake, still wearing the blue silk dress and heavy sapphires.
Mary found her there when she came to help her dress.
Your Grace. Mary's shock was genuine. You've been up all night? Couldn't sleep. Elizabeth's voice was hoarse from lack of use. New house. Strange bed. You understand.
Mary's eyes said she understood far more than that, but her mouth stayed carefully neutral. His Grace has already breakfasted and gone riding.
He left instructions you're to meet Mrs. Thornton at 10 o'clock for your household orientation. Gone. Good. Elizabeth couldn't face him yet. Couldn't look at him without seeing Catherine's handwriting, hearing her desperate final words. She thought, how do you sit across from a murderer and pretend everything's fine? How do you smile and play Duchess when every instinct screams to run? But she couldn't run. Not while Thomas needed the doctors. Not while Blackwood held all the power. So she'd do what desperate women had done for centuries, she'd smile and plan and wait for the moment to strike back. "Help me change," she told Mary. "Something simple. I'm meeting Lady Victoria at 2 o'clock. A social call." Something flickered in Mary's eyes, warning? Concern? "Lady Victoria Ashford, Your Grace?" "Yes." "Why?" "No reason." But Mary's hands trembled slightly as she unlaced the dress. "Just be careful with her ladyship. She has a reputation for being complicated." Complicated. Everyone in this world spoke in codes and warnings. Elizabeth was so tired of it. She thought, let Victoria be complicated. Let her be dangerous. At least she's honest about it. At least with her, I'll know where the knives are coming from. By 2 o'clock, Elizabeth waited in the drawing room, wearing a burgundy day dress that had probably belonged to Catherine. Everything belonged to Catherine. The whole manor was a museum to a dead woman, and Elizabeth was the newest exhibit. The butler announced, "Lady Victoria Ashford." Victoria swept in like a storm in rose silk, all sharp beauty and calculating eyes. She took one look at Elizabeth's face and smiled. A real smile, not the society mask. "Oh darling," she said, settling onto the sofa with practiced grace. "You look absolutely haunted. Tell me everything." Elizabeth told Victoria everything. The journal. Catherine's desperate final words. Blackwood's threat against Thomas. The locked east wing. Every detail spilled out like poison from a wound that needed lancing. Victoria listened without interrupting, her sharp eyes growing sharper with each revelation. When Elizabeth finished, Victoria stood and moved to the window, silent for a long moment. She thought, I'd made a mistake. She's going to tell everyone. Turn this into society gossip. Destroy what little protection I have left. But when Victoria turned back, her expression was deadly serious. Alexander didn't kill Catherine. I know because I was here that night. Elizabeth's breath caught. What? September 3, 1842. I came to visit Catherine. We'd been friends since childhood despite her marrying the man I loved. Victoria's voice was crisp, matter-of-fact. I arrived around 6 in the evening. Found her locked in the east wing, bleeding and terrified. She begged me to send for Dr. Pemberton. I tried. I ordered Morrison to fetch him immediately. And Morrison refused. Said His Grace had given explicit orders that Catherine wasn't to be disturbed. That she was being punished and would receive help when she'd learned her lesson. Victoria's hands clenched into fists. I rode for the doctor myself. By the time we returned 2 hours later, she was dying. The baby, she stopped, swallowed hard. There was so much blood. Elizabeth felt cold settle in her bones. Where was Blackwood? London. He'd left that morning for business, wouldn't return until the next day. Victoria moved closer, her perfume roses and something darker overwhelming in the small space. Don't you see? Alexander didn't refuse to send for the doctor. Morrison did. On whose authority, I don't know. But Alexander wasn't even here when Catherine died. The world tilted. Elizabeth gripped the chair back for support. She thought, if Blackwood wasn't here, if he didn't give those orders, then who did? And why would Morrison claim otherwise? Morrison lied to her, Elizabeth whispered. Made Catherine think Alexander had abandoned her. Made her die believing her husband wanted her dead. And now Morrison serves Alexander with perfect loyalty, keeping secrets, controlling access to certain rooms. Victoria's eyes glittered with something between satisfaction and rage. Interesting, isn't it? What would make a butler commit murder and then stay to watch the aftermath? Murder. The word hung between them like smoke. Elizabeth's mind raced through implications. He's being blackmailed. Or paid. Or he's protecting something. Victoria pulled a folded paper from her reticule. "I've spent 3 years wondering about that night. So I hired investigators. Discreet ones. They found this in the county records office last month." Elizabeth unfolded the paper with trembling hands. It was a birth certificate. Catherine in Blackwood, daughter of Edmund Blackwood, Duke of Blackwood, and in Whitmore, born September 3, 1842, at 7:45 in the evening. The name hit her like a physical blow. Anne Whitmore. Her mother's name. "That's impossible," she said, but her voice had no conviction. "My mother was in Whitmore, but she couldn't have. Your mother in Whitmore was presented at court in 1820. She spent a season in London. During that season, she became very close with Edmund Blackwood, Alexander's father." Victoria's voice was gentle now, almost kind. "They were expected to marry. Instead, she left London suddenly. Pregnant, according to my investigators. She married your father, a nobody with no money, within a month." Elizabeth couldn't breathe. The room spun. She thought, no, this is wrong. Mother would have told me. She wouldn't have kept something like this secret. But even as she thought it, memories surfaced. Her mother's sadness whenever anyone mentioned London. The way she'd insisted Elizabeth never seek out society, never try to reclaim their fallen status. The deathbed words Elizabeth had thought were fever dreams: "You're more than you know. More than I could ever tell you. Forgive me." "You're saying," Elizabeth forced the words through numb lips, "that I'm Catherine's daughter?" "That the baby didn't die. Dr. Pemberton delivered the baby alive. I saw her. You had dark hair and gray-green eyes and the most furious cry I'd ever heard." Victoria smiled slightly at the memory. "Catherine made him promise. Made me promise. Get the baby to in Whitmore. Keep her safe from whoever wanted Catherine dead. So we did. Pemberton told Alexander the baby died. I spirited you away too in that same night." The world reformed around this new truth. Elizabeth was Catherine's daughter. Edmund Blackwood's granddaughter. Which meant the estate, she whispered. The inheritance. "If I'm Catherine and Edmund's daughter, legitimate and recorded, you're the rightful heir to Blackwood." Victoria's smile turned sharp. "The estate passes through male line first, but in the absence of male heirs, it goes to legitimate female heirs. Edmund died 5 years ago. Alexander inherited because everyone thought Catherine's daughter was dead. But you're not dead, darling. You're very much alive. And you just married the man who's been sitting on your inheritance." Elizabeth sank into a chair, legs no longer supporting her. She thought, this changes everything. I'm not a bought wife. I'm the rightful Duchess. The estate is mine by blood, not marriage. Does Blackwood know? She asked. I don't think so. If he knew, why would he marry you? It only complicates his legal position. Victoria paced, mind clearly working through angles. No, I think this is coincidence. Tragic, ironic coincidence. He found a desperate girl who looked like Catherine and married her for his own twisted reasons. He has no idea he's actually married his father's granddaughter. A laugh bubbled up in Elizabeth's throat, hysterical and bitter. So I'm not just wearing a dead woman's dresses. I'm wearing my mother's dresses. Living in my grandfather's house. Married to, she stopped. What is Alexander to me? Stepson? Step-grandson? This is insane. This is an opportunity. Victoria knelt before her, gripping her hands. Elizabeth, listen to me. With the right legal strategy, you can claim the entire estate. Blackwood becomes dependent on you, not the other way around. You hold all the power. Power. The word should have excited her. Instead, she felt only exhaustion. She thought, I came here to save Thomas. Now I'm caught in a web of murder and inheritance and secrets that go back decades. All I wanted was bread. How did it come to this?
There's more, Victoria said quietly.
Morrison.
He's been managing estate finances for 30 years.
My investigators found irregularities. Money disappearing. Properties sold without proper documentation. He's been embezzling, Elizabeth.
Has been for years.
Catherine discovered it. That's why she had to die. The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. Catherine had found Morrison's theft.
Confronted him, perhaps.
So he'd let her die in childbirth and blamed Alexander.
Kept the secret all these years while continuing to steal. And now Elizabeth had stumbled into the same trap. He knows I found the journal, Elizabeth said, ice forming in her veins.
Blackwood caught me with it last night. Morrison must have told him where to find me. Then Morrison knows you're a threat.
Victoria's grip tightened.
Just like Catherine was.
A sound in the hallway made them both freeze.
Footsteps. Slow, measured, approaching the drawing room door. The door opened.
Morrison stood there, his silver hair gleaming, his face expressionless. Behind him stood two large men Elizabeth had never seen before, rough types who looked decidedly unlike household servants. I'm afraid Lady Victoria's visit must end now, Morrison said, his voice carrying absolute authority. His Grace has requested her ladyship leave immediately.
And your Grace, his cold eyes fixed on Elizabeth.
His Grace requires your presence in his study.
Now. Victoria stood, her posture defiant. I'm not leaving her alone with you, Morrison. Not after what you did to Catherine. Morrison's expression didn't flicker. I'm afraid you have no choice, Lady Victoria.
These gentlemen will escort you to your carriage. Resist, and I'll be forced to inform His Grace about your unsavory habit of visiting certain establishments in Whitechapel. The ones where ladies of quality purchase substances they shouldn't.
Victoria's face went white.
Elizabeth watched the older woman's defiance crumble in real time.
She thought, he has dirt on everyone.
That's how he's survived this long.
Blackmail and fear and secrets he can weaponize. Elizabeth, Victoria began. It's fine.
Elizabeth forced her voice steady even as her heart hammered against her ribs. I'll be perfectly safe speaking with my husband.
Won't I, Morrison?
The unspoken threat hung in the air, touch me, and people will ask questions.
But Morrison's slight smile said he'd heard the fear beneath her bravado.
Of course, Your Grace. His Grace simply wishes to discuss household matters.
Nothing alarming.
He gestured toward the door with false courtesy.
This way, if you please.
Victoria squeezed Elizabeth's hand once, a gesture of solidarity or goodbye, Elizabeth couldn't tell which, before the two rough men escorted her out. The sound of her retreating footsteps felt like hope walking away. Morrison led Elizabeth through corridors that felt narrower than before, as if the house itself was closing in. The smell of beeswax and old wood surrounded her, cloying and oppressive.
Her sapphire necklace, Catherine's necklace, felt like a noose.
She thought, this is how Catherine felt. Walking to her death in her own home.
Surrounded by beauty and wealth but utterly alone. They reached Blackwood's study.
Morrison knocked twice and opened the door without waiting for response. Your Grace, the Duchess is here as requested.
Blackwood stood by the window, silhouetted against gray afternoon light. He didn't turn around. Thank you, Morrison. You may go.
Your Grace, I really think I should, I said go. The command in his voice was absolute.
Morrison hesitated, then bowed stiffly and left.
The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a trap springing shut.
Silence stretched between them.
Elizabeth counted her heartbeats, 10, 20, 30, before Blackwood finally spoke.
How much did Victoria tell you? Straight to it, then. No pretense.
Elizabeth lifted her chin, channeling courage she didn't feel.
Everything. About Catherine. About Morrison refusing to send for the doctor. About you being in London when she died. He turned.
His face was haggard, shadows carved beneath his eyes like he hadn't slept either. For the first time, he looked less like a dupe and more like a man carrying weight that might crush him.
And you believe her?
His voice was carefully neutral.
I don't know what to believe anymore.
The honesty surprised her. She thought, 24 hours ago, I thought him a murderer.
Now I don't know. Is he victim or villain? Both? Neither?
Blackwood moved to his desk and pulled out a bottle of whiskey, pouring 2 glasses with hands that shook slightly.
He offered her one.
You look like you need this more than propriety.
She took it.
The crystal was heavy, the amber liquid catching light like trapped fire.
She didn't drink, just held it because it gave her hands something to do.
I didn't kill Catherine, he said finally, sinking into his chair as if exhausted.
I swear to you on everything I hold sacred.
I loved her. Even after I learned about her affair with my father, even knowing the child wasn't mine, I loved her.
I was angry, yes. Devastated.
I locked her in the East Wing while I tried to process the betrayal.
But I gave explicit orders to Morrison.
If labor started, send for Pemberton immediately.
No delays. No matter what. Then why did Morrison disobey? That's what I've spent 3 years trying to understand.
He drank his whiskey in one swallow, poured another. Morrison has been with this family 40 years.
My father trusted him absolutely. I trusted him.
But Victoria's right, something's wrong.
Money's been disappearing. Small amounts at first, easily explained. But I've been auditing the books this past month. Thousands of pounds vanished. Properties sold without my knowledge. All of it pointing to Morrison. Elizabeth's mind raced. She thought, do I tell him? Do I reveal that I'm Catherine's daughter? That changes everything.
Makes me his enemy or his ally depending on how he reacts. Before she could decide, Blackwood continued, last night, after I found you with the journal, I confronted Morrison.
Asked him directly why he delayed calling Pemberton. He claimed he was following my orders.
Said I gave them before leaving for London, that I wanted Catherine to suffer before receiving help.
And you didn't. I didn't.
He looked at her with raw desperation.
Elizabeth, you have to believe me.
I'm many things: cold, controlling, half-mad with grief.
But I'm not a murderer. I didn't want Catherine dead. I wanted answers.
I wanted to understand why she betrayed me.
She did believe him.
Against all logic, against the evidence of the journal and Catherine's final words, she believed him. Because she'd seen the same confusion in his eyes that she felt. They were both pawns in someone else's game. Morrison killed her, Elizabeth said quietly.
Or let her die. Same thing. The question is why? Because she discovered his embezzlement. Victoria's investigators found proof? It wasn't really a question. Yes.
Blackwood nodded slowly, pieces clicking into place behind his eyes. Then we're both in danger. If Morrison realizes we know, a crash from upstairs made them both jump.
Shouting. Running footsteps.
Then a scream, high-pitched, terrified, young.
Thomas. Elizabeth ran.
Didn't think, just ran, her skirts tangling around her legs. Behind her, Blackwood's footsteps pounded. Up the stairs, down the corridor toward the East Wing. The door stood open, the door that was supposed to stay locked.
Thomas's room.
She burst through to find Morrison holding her brother by the arm, his other hand pressed over Thomas's mouth. The 2 rough men from earlier stood blocking the window.
Let him go. Elizabeth's voice came out as a shriek. Morrison smiled.
It was the most terrifying thing she'd ever seen, pleasant and cold and utterly devoid of humanity. I'm afraid I can't do that, Your Grace.
You and Lady Victoria have been asking too many questions. Making too many connections. It's time to simplify matters. Simplify matters? Blackwood's voice cut through the room like ice.
He stepped forward, positioning himself between Morrison and Elizabeth.
By threatening a child? You've gone too far, Morrison. The butler's smile widened. I've gone exactly far enough, Your Grace. 3 years I've kept this house running while you wallowed in grief. 3 years I've managed every detail, every secret, every inconvenient truth. Did you really think I'd let some gutter snipe ruin everything? Thomas struggled against Morrison's grip, his eyes wide with terror above the hand covering his mouth. Elizabeth's heart shattered watching him. She thought, I brought him here to save him. Instead, I've put him in more danger than starvation ever was. What do you want? Elizabeth forced the words through the panic clawing at her throat. What I've always wanted. What I've earned through 40 years of service to this family. Morrison's voice carried decades of resentment like poison. The Blackwood fortune. The respect I deserve. Recognition that I'm more than a servant waiting on aristocrats who inherited everything while I got nothing. You've been stealing for years, Blackwood said coldly. Catherine discovered it. That's why you let her die. Catherine was a fool who couldn't mind her own business. Morrison's grip tightened on Thomas, making the boy whimper. The sound drove daggers through Elizabeth's chest. She found the ledgers. Threatened to expose me. I couldn't allow that. So yes, I delayed calling the doctor. I told her it was your order, watched her write those pathetic journal entries blaming you. Then I watched her bleed out. The casual cruelty of it stole Elizabeth's breath. She thought, he's not just a thief. He's a monster who's been living in this house for 3 years, serving dinner and managing staff and sleeping peacefully while Blackwood tortured himself with guilt that wasn't his. Let the boy go. Blackwood's hand moved subtly toward his coat pocket where Elizabeth knew he kept a pistol. Take me as hostage if you need leverage. But he's innocent. So was Catherine's baby. That didn't save her. Morrison nodded to his 2 men. Secure his grace. And you, he looked at Elizabeth with cold calculation. You're going to sign a document transferring all financial authority to me. If you don't, the boy dies. Simple as that. One of the rough men moved toward Blackwood. In a flash of movement, Blackwood pulled the pistol and fired. The crack of gunpowder was deafening in the small room. The man screamed and fell, clutching his shoulder. Everything happened at once. The second man lunged at Blackwood. They crashed into the writing desk, sending papers and ink flying. Thomas bit down hard on Morrison's hand. The butler cursed and loosened his grip. Elizabeth didn't think, just moved on pure instinct. She grabbed the heavy brass candlestick from the bedside table and swung it at Morrison's head. The impact resonated through her arms. Morrison stumbled backward, releasing Thomas completely. Blood streamed from a gash above his eye, making him look less like a dignified butler and more like the criminal he'd always been. Run, Thomas. Run. Elizabeth screamed. Thomas ran. Bolted for the door like his life depended on it, which it did. Elizabeth started after him, but Morrison grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. His face was a mask of rage, all pretense of civility shattered. You stupid girl, he hissed, breath hot and sour against her face. You have no idea what you've done. I'll kill him. I'll kill you both. Behind them, Blackwood grappled with the second man. Furniture crashed. Glass shattered. The smell of blood and gunpowder and fear filled the air, acrid and overwhelming. Elizabeth thought, I'm going to die here. In this room where my mother died. History repeating itself because I was stupid enough to think I could fight back. But then she remembered she wasn't just Elizabeth Grey from Whitechapel anymore. She was Elizabeth Blackwood. Catherine's daughter. The rightful heir to this estate. And she'd be damned if she'd die in her own house. She drove her knee up into Morrison's stomach with all her strength. He doubled over with a grunt. She wrenched free and ran for the door, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might explode. Thomas stood in the hallway, frozen with fear. Lizzie, go. Find help. Find anyone. She pushed him toward the stairs just as Morrison emerged from the room, blood streaming down his face, murder in his eyes.
You can't escape, he said, advancing slowly like a predator who knew the prey was cornered.
This entire house is mine.
Every servant, every room, every exit.
Where will you run?
He was right. The realization hit her like cold water. She thought, he's controlled this place for 40 years.
He knows every passage, every hiding place.
And we're in the East Wing, the wing he keeps locked. The wing where Catherine died. But then Blackwood appeared in the doorway behind Morrison, his face bloody but alive. In his hand, the pistol.
Morrison. Stop.
The butler turned slowly.
Saw the gun. Laughed, a sound like breaking glass, sharp and wrong.
You won't shoot me, Your Grace. If I die, all the evidence I've collected disappears. Every detail about your father and Catherine. About this girl's true identity. His eyes gleamed with malicious triumph.
Yes, I know who she is. Knew the moment I saw her. Catherine's daughter. Edmund's granddaughter. Do you really think I'd let her waltz in here and claim what I've spent decades securing?
Elizabeth's blood ran cold. She thought, he's known all along. Every moment I thought I was being clever, he was 3 steps ahead. So here's what's going to happen, Morrison continued, his voice unnaturally calm.
You're going to put down that gun. The girl is going to sign over financial control. And young Thomas is going to have a tragic accident. Something quick and clean.
The authorities will be very sympathetic to a sickly boy falling down the stairs in an unfamiliar house.
No, Elizabeth whispered. Then louder, no. I won't let you hurt him.
Then watch him die. Morrison pulled a knife from his coat, long, sharp, gleaming in the gray afternoon light. Your choice, Your Grace. Sign the papers or bury your brother.
What's it going to be?
The knife caught the light, throwing reflections across the wall like scattered stars. Elizabeth looked at Thomas's terrified face, at Blackwood's gun that might or might not fire again, at Morrison's cold smile that promised death either way.
She thought, there has to be a way out. There has to be.
And then she heard it, footsteps on the stairs.
Multiple footsteps.
Voices. The front door crashing open.
Blackwood Manor. Opened by order of the magistrate. Morrison's face went white.
He spun toward the sound, knife still raised. In that moment of distraction, Blackwood fired.
The shot took Morrison in the leg.
He went down with a scream, the knife clattering across the floor. And suddenly the hallway filled with constables in uniform, led by a man Elizabeth recognized from Victoria's drawing room, one of her investigators. Victoria herself stood at the back, her face grim with satisfaction. I told you I had resources, darling, Victoria said, stepping over Morrison's writhing form.
Did you really think I'd leave you without backup? Elizabeth's legs gave out.
She sank to the floor, pulling Thomas into her arms, feeling his heart race against her chest.
Alive. He was alive.
They were both alive.
She thought, it's over. It's finally over.
But even as the constables hauled Morrison away in chains, even as Blackwood lowered his gun with shaking hands, Elizabeth knew the hardest part was yet to come. Because now they had to face the truth of who she was, what that meant, and whether their marriage of desperation could become something real.
The magistrate's office smelled of old paper and tobacco, musty and oppressive.
Elizabeth sat in a hard wooden chair, Thomas pressed against her side, while constables questioned them for the 3rd time in as many hours.
Her voice had gone hoarse from recounting Morrison's confession, the knife, the gunshots.
She thought, 3 days ago I sold Mother's dress for bread.
Now I'm testifying about murder and embezzlement in a magistrate's office. How does a life change so completely, so fast? Blackwood stood by the window, his face unreadable.
Blood had dried on his temple from the fight, making him look less like a duke and more like a soldier returned from battle. Every few minutes his eyes found hers across the room, checking. She realized that she was still there.
Still real. Still alive. And you're certain Morrison confessed to causing Lady Catherine's death?
The magistrate was a portly man with kind eyes that had seen too much cruelty.
His exact words, "If you please, Your Grace." He said he delayed calling the doctor because Catherine discovered his embezzlement. That he told her the delay was on my husband's orders. That he watched her die. Elizabeth's voice cracked on the last word. She thought, my mother. He killed my mother and let Blackwood carry the guilt for 3 years. The magistrate made notes with a scratching quill that sounded too loud in the quiet office. And the 2 men he employed to assist him? Hired muscle from London, Victoria interjected from her position near the door. She'd refused to leave, claiming she was Elizabeth's companion and therefore necessary. My investigators identified them. Known criminals. They'll testify against Morrison to reduce their own sentences. Very good. More scratching. The magistrate looked up at Blackwood. Your Grace, I must ask, did you discharge your weapon with intent to kill? I discharged it with intent to protect my wife and her brother from a man who just threatened to murder a child. Blackwood's voice was cold, controlled, but Elizabeth heard the tremor beneath. If that constitutes attempted murder, then charge me. I'd do it again. The magistrate sighed. Self-defense is clear. No charges against you, Your Grace. Morrison, however, will hang. The evidence is overwhelming. He closed his ledger with finality. You're free to go. We'll need you to testify at trial, but that won't be for some months. Meanwhile, he looked at Elizabeth with something like pity. I suggest you rest, Your Grace. You've had quite an ordeal. Ordeal. Such a small word for the nightmare she'd survived. Elizabeth stood on shaking legs, Thomas's hand tight in hers. Blackwood moved to her other side, not touching but close enough that she felt his presence like warmth from a fire. They emerged into grey London evening. The carriage waited, black and anonymous. None of them spoke during the ride back to Blackwood Manor. What was there to say? The silence felt heavy with unspoken truths and questions that had no easy answers. The manor looked different somehow. Less like a tomb and more like a house that had been sick but might recover. Servants lined up to greet them, former Morrison loyalists who'd watched their master dragged away in chains and now looked at Blackwood with new eyes. Fear, perhaps. Or respect earned through violence. Take Master Thomas to his rooms, Blackwood told a young maid. See that he has whatever he needs. Warm bath, hot food, a comfortable bed. Thomas clung to Elizabeth's hand. Lizzie, don't leave me. I won't. I promise. She knelt to his level, ignoring the protest of her tired muscles. I just need to speak with His Grace for a few minutes. Then I'll come sit with you until you fall asleep. All right? He nodded reluctantly and let the maid lead him away. Elizabeth watched him go, her heart aching. She thought, he's 12 years old and he's seen violence and death. How do I protect him from nightmares? How do I protect myself? Elizabeth. Blackwood's voice was soft. My study. Please. We need to talk. She followed him through corridors that felt less oppressive now. Or perhaps she was just too exhausted to feel anything properly. The study looked exactly as it had that morning, had it only been that morning, when they'd stood here planning to confront Morrison. A lifetime ago. Blackwood poured 2 glasses of brandy with hands that shook slightly. He handed her one and drank his own in a single swallow. When he spoke, his voice was raw. I'm sorry. 2 words. Simple. Devastating. For what? She genuinely didn't know which of the dozens of sins he was apologizing for. Everything. Bringing you into this nightmare. Threatening Thomas when I found you with the journal. I was terrified of what you discovered, not thinking clearly. I should have trusted you. He ran a hand through his hair, making it stand on end. You could have died today because of my family's dysfunction. Because I was too blind to see Morrison for what he was. Elizabeth sank into a chair, suddenly too tired to stand. You didn't know. None of us knew. I should have. Bitterness edged his words. I've lived with that man for 3 years.
Trusted him with everything while he stole and murdered and let me believe I'd killed my wife through cruelty.
I'm supposed to be intelligent, observant. Instead, I was a fool.
She thought, he's been carrying this guilt so long he doesn't know how to put it down. Even now, with proof he's innocent, he's finding ways to blame himself.
Alexander. She used his name deliberately, not his title.
Morrison was a professional liar who'd spent 40 years perfecting his masks.
He fooled your father too. He fooled Catherine. He fooled everyone.
You're not a fool for trusting someone who seemed trustworthy.
You're human.
He looked at her, then really looked, seeing past the Duchess costume to the woman beneath.
How are you so calm? After everything that happened? I'm not calm. I'm terrified and exhausted, and I have no idea what happens next. The honesty felt like relief.
But falling apart won't help Thomas.
Won't help me.
So I'm staying together until it's safe to fall apart later.
You're extraordinary.
The words came out wondering, as if he'd just discovered something precious.
I'm desperate. There's a difference.
But her lips curved slightly despite everything. Though I suppose desperation can look like bravery if you squint.
A pause. Then, Victoria told you. About Catherine being your mother. About you being the rightful heir. Not a question. Elizabeth nodded. Yes. And I don't know what that means yet.
Legally, practically, personally. She met his eyes.
What do you want it to mean? He stopped, started again. 3 days ago I married you thinking you were a replacement. A ghost I could control. Now I know you're Catherine's daughter. My father's granddaughter.
The rightful owner of everything I've called mine for 5 years.
By all logic, I should resent you. Fear you. Want you gone. Her chest tightened. But
when Morrison had that knife to your throat, all I could think was, I can't lose her.
Not like I lost Catherine. Not before I've had a chance to know her.
He moved closer, dropping to one knee so they were eye level.
I don't want you as a ghost, Elizabeth.
I don't want you as a legal inconvenience or a replacement for someone dead.
I want you as yourself. If you'll have me. Elizabeth's breath caught. She thought, is he saying what I think he's saying? After everything, the lies, the threats, the violence, can we actually choose each other freely?
I don't know who I am anymore, she said quietly.
3 days ago I was starving. Yesterday I was a bought wife.
Today I'm Catherine's daughter and an heiress and someone who hit a man with a candlestick. I don't know which Elizabeth you want because I don't know which one is real.
All of them.
His gray eyes were earnest, open in a way she'd never seen.
The desperate girl who sold her mother's dress.
The brave woman who signed a devil's bargain to save her brother. The Duchess who faced down a murderer with nothing but a brass candlestick. You're all of those things, and I want to know every version. Tears pricked her eyes. She thought, I've cried more in 3 days than in 2 years of poverty.
Maybe that's what safety does, lets you finally feel everything you've been too busy surviving to acknowledge. What about the inheritance? She had to ask. Had to know. Victoria's investigators have proof I'm legitimate. I could claim everything. Make you dependent on me instead of the other way around. Doesn't that terrify you?
Yes. His honesty surprised her. I was raised to believe my worth came from my title, my land, my money. Losing it should terrify me. But Elizabeth, he took her hand, his skin warm against hers. I've spent 3 years living in a palace and feeling like I was drowning. Today I nearly died in a nursery fighting for people I care about, and I felt more alive than I have since Catherine passed.
Maybe it's time I figured out who Alexander Blackwood is without the duchy to hide behind.
She stared at their joined hands, his aristocratic fingers intertwined with her work-roughened ones. Two people from different worlds who'd collided in an alley and somehow found their way here. She thought, is this what love looks like? Not the fairy tale kind,
But the real kind built from shared trauma and desperate choices and deciding to try anyway?
I don't want your duchy, she said finally.
I want Thomas safe.
I want to sleep without nightmares. I want to figure out who my mother really was and make peace with the fact that she kept so many secrets. And I want, she stopped, gathering courage. I want to see if this marriage of desperation can become something that isn't desperate.
Something chosen. A real marriage.
He said it like testing the words.
Not a contract. Not a business arrangement. A partnership.
Between equals who've both made terrible choices and are trying to be better.
She smiled slightly. It won't be easy. We barely know each other. You're grieving Catherine. I'm grieving the mother I thought I had. We're both damaged and traumatized and we have no idea what we're doing. When you put it that way, we sound utterly hopeless.
But his eyes held warmth now, the ice melting into something that might be hope.
Or we sound human.
She squeezed his hand.
Ask me again in 6 months. The length of our original contract.
See if we still want this when the drama settles and we're left with ordinary life.
6 months.
He stood, pulling her to her feet.
I can work with that.
They stood close enough that she could see gold flecks in his gray eyes, could smell bay rum and gunpowder still clinging to his coat.
Close enough to kiss if either of them was brave enough. But neither moved. Some things needed time.
I should check on Thomas, Elizabeth said. And I should deal with hiring a new estate manager.
He smiled wryly.
Preferably one who isn't a murderous embezzler.
Set the bar low, I see.
The joke, small and fragile as it was, felt like the first normal moment they'd shared. Elizabeth laughed, surprising herself.
The sound echoed in the quiet study, chasing away ghosts.
6 months later, spring had transformed the Blackwood Gardens into riot of color. Elizabeth sat on a stone bench watching Thomas play with a wooden sword, healthy and laughing in a way she thought she'd never see again. Dr. Pemberton had declared him fully recovered. The nightmares had faded.
Children were resilient like that. Plotting something? Alexander's voice came from behind her.
She smiled without turning.
Just thinking how far we've come. From desperate strangers to what are we now?
He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched.
Friends who are married. Allies who share trauma. Two people figuring it out as they go. Very romantic.
But her tone was warm, teasing.
Give me time. I'm new at this.
He took her hand, lacing their fingers together.
How's the estate transfer going?
They'd worked it out with lawyers over the past months. Elizabeth was legally the heir, but she'd chosen to share authority rather than claim it all.
Blackwood managed the lands and business.
She managed the household and finances, with full transparency.
Partnership, as promised.
The accounts are recovering.
Turns out Morrison stole far more than we thought. Nearly bankrupted the estate.
She shook her head.
But we're rebuilding. Slowly. We. He tested the word. I like how that sounds. Me too.
She leaned against his shoulder, comfortable in a way that had taken months to build.
Victoria asked if we'd attend her garden party next week. Apparently our dramatic romance has made us the talk of society. She wants to show us off. Victoria would. He paused. Do you want to go? I think so. Might as well face the gossip head-on. She looked up at him. Together? Together.
He bent and kissed her forehead, not passionate, but tender. A promise of more to come when they were both ready. Elizabeth watched Thomas chase butterflies and thought, this isn't the fairy tale I dreamed of as a child. It's messier, more complicated, built on darker foundations.
But it's real. And real is enough.
She'd learned something these past months: courage wasn't the absence of fear.
It was choosing connection despite every reason to hide.
Choosing hope despite evidence that hope was foolish.
Choosing to build something new from the ruins of what came before. What are you thinking? Alexander asked softly. That we survived. Both of us. Despite everything that tried to break us. She smiled. And that's worth celebrating. Then let's celebrate. He stood, offering his hand. Walk with me? I want to show you the rose garden. It was Catherine's favorite place. I think she'd be happy knowing her daughter walks there now. Elizabeth took his hand and let him lead her through gardens her mother had once loved. Behind them, Thomas's laughter rang out bright and clear. Ahead, roses bloomed in colors that promised beauty could grow even from thorny stems. She thought, maybe redemption looks like this. Not grand gestures or perfect endings, but choosing each day to be a little braver, a little kinder, a little more open than the day before. Choosing love not because it's easy, but because it's worth the risk. And in that moment, walking hand in hand through sun-warmed gardens with a man who'd been stranger, enemy, ally, and now something more, Elizabeth felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope.